The rain had been falling for hours, the kind of relentless downpour that made the world outside seem darker than it already was. And when Daniel heard the faint knock on his creaky front door, he thought at first he was imagining it. No one ever visited him this late at night, not in his quiet corner of town where neighbors minded their own business, and certainly not in weather like this. He paused, his hands still wet from the dishes he was washing, and listened. Another knock followed, softer, more hesitant this time, almost as though whoever was out there was afraid of what they might find on the other side. He frowned, wiped his hands on a rag, and went to open the door. When he pulled it open, the sight that met him stopped him cold. Two little girls, no older than 8 or 9, stood shivering on his porch. Their dresses were soaked through, their long dark hair plastered to their small faces, and their big brown eyes were wide with something between fear and hope. For a moment Daniel could only stare. His mind scrambled for logic. Who were they? Why were they out here alone in the rain? And why, when they looked at him, did it feel like they were silently begging him for something much deeper than just shelter? "Mister, please," one of the girls whispered, her voice trembling. "We don't have anywhere else to go." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. He knew too well what it felt like to have nowhere to go, to feel abandoned by the world. He glanced behind them, half expecting to see a parent rushing up the walkway, but the street was empty, swallowed by rain and shadows. He exhaled, torn between caution and compassion, and then he stepped aside. "Come in," he said quietly, and the girls didn't hesitate. They rushed inside, dripping water across the worn wooden floor, their small hands clutching each other tightly as if letting go might mean losing everything. Daniel closed the door and leaned against it for a second, trying to make sense of the moment. He was a single dad, barely surviving himself, and here were two strange little girls standing in his living room, like fragile birds fallen from the sky. He finally managed to speak. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently, but the girls only exchanged a quick look, a kind of silent conversation that children who've been through too much seem to have. One of them, the slightly taller one, answered, "They're not here. We just need a place for tonight." Just one night. Her words sounded rehearsed, as if she'd had to say them before. Daniel swallowed hard. He should call someone, the police maybe, or child services. That would be the reasonable thing, the safe thing. But as he looked at them, so small, so lost, something inside him refused. He knew what those systems could be like, how children could be swallowed whole by bureaucracy, passed around, forgotten. He thought of his own daughter, Lily, sleeping in her room down the hall, and how he would never forgive himself if he turned these girls away. "All right," he said after a long pause. "Just for tonight." Relief washed over their faces, and they both nodded quickly. He led them into the small kitchen, where the yellow light overhead flickered and hummed. The house wasn't much. It hadn't been since his wife left years ago, and Daniel had poured what little money he had into keeping it barely livable. But tonight it felt like a safe harbor, at least compared to the storm outside. He pulled out a couple of old towels and handed them to the girls, who dried themselves off with gratitude written in their eyes. "What are your names?" he asked, trying to sound calm. "I'm Emma," the taller one said softly. "And this is Ella." Twins, he realized suddenly. Their faces, though not identical, carried the same delicate features, the same haunting depth in their eyes. He gave them a small nod. "Well, Emma and Ella, I'm Daniel. And my daughter Lily is just down the hall, asleep. She's about your age." He noticed the way they stiffened at the mention of another child, but then curiosity softened their faces. For a while no one spoke, and only the rain filled the silence. Daniel warmed some soup on the stove and placed steaming bowls in front of them. They ate like they hadn't had a proper meal in days, and watching them stirred something deep in him, an ache that was both tender and heavy. He recognized the signs of hunger, of exhaustion, of children carrying burdens far too big for their shoulders. Later, when the dishes were done and the house was quiet again, he showed them to the couch, laying out blankets and pillows. They curled up together without complaint, as if just having a roof and warmth was luxury enough. Daniel lingered for a moment, watching them breathe in unison, and he felt a pang in his chest. He didn't know their story yet, didn't know why fate had brought them to his door, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't look away. Something about those girls demanded more than just one night of kindness. Still, he told himself it was temporary. Tomorrow he would figure things out. Tonight he just needed to make sure they were safe. But as he turned to go, Emma's small voice stopped him. "Mr. Daniel?" He looked back. Her eyes, wide and shining even in the dim light, held a weight far beyond her years. "Thank you for not asking us to leave." The words were simple, but they carried a tremor that broke his heart. He gave her a gentle nod. "You're safe here. Get some rest." And with that, he retreated to his room, though sleep didn't come easily. He lay awake, listening to the rain and wondering what kind of world left two little girls knocking on a stranger's door in the dead of night. The next morning came with sunlight streaming weakly through the thin curtains. Daniel was in the kitchen making pancakes when Lily padded in, her hair messy from sleep. "Dad, who are they?" she asked, pointing to the twins who were now sitting awkwardly at the table. Daniel hesitated. He didn't have the right answer, not yet. "They're friends who needed a place to stay last night," he said softly. Lily studied them for a moment, then gave a small smile. "Hi, I'm Lily." The twins responded shyly, their voices barely above whispers, but something unspoken passed between the three girls. Children had a way of connecting faster than adults, bypassing all the walls and questions. By the time breakfast was over, they were already sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, sharing toys and laughter that sounded almost foreign in Daniel's worn-out house. He watched from the doorway, the sound wrapping around him like a bomb, but beneath it lingered unease. This wasn't sustainable. He couldn't just keep two strange children without knowing their story. That afternoon, when the twins were busy with Lily, Daniel stepped outside to make a call. He dialed a local shelter, but when they answered, something in his gut twisted. The thought of sending Emma and Ella away, of breaking whatever fragile trust they had in him, felt wrong. He hung up before the conversation went too far. He leaned against the porch railing, running a hand through his hair, and asked himself what he was doing. He had no money, no resources, barely enough to raise his own daughter. And yet, when he thought about those girls going back to whatever had driven them to his door, he knew he couldn't let it happen. Days turned into a week. The girls stayed. Daniel told himself each morning that he would figure it out tomorrow, that he would call someone, but tomorrow never came. Instead, he found himself growing used to their presence, the sound of their laughter mingling with Lily's, the way Emma always tried to help with chores, the way Ella hummed softly to herself when she thought no one was listening. They were healing slowly, but he could still see the shadows in their eyes, the moments of silence where their smiles faded, and the weight of unspoken memories pressed down. He didn't push. He knew better than to force a story out of someone not ready to tell it. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Daniel sat at the table with a stack of unpaid bills. He stared at the numbers, the red notices, and felt despair creeping in. He was drowning financially, and adding two more mouths to feed was reckless. But when he thought about sending them away, he couldn't do it. He rubbed his temples, muttering under his breath, "What am I doing?" He didn't hear Emma approach until she spoke. "You're helping us," she said simply, her voice small but steady. He looked up, startled, and saw her standing in the doorway. "And no one else has." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and for the first time she let some of her guard down. "Our dad, he left us. Or maybe he didn't mean to, I don't know. But he's gone. And our mom? She's been gone for years." She bit her lip, her hands twisting together nervously. "We didn't know where else to go. But when we saw your house, it looked like home." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He wanted to ask questions, to know more, but he also didn't want to push her further than she was ready to go. Instead, he simply nodded. "You're safe here," he said again, and she nodded back, her small shoulders sagging with relief. As she turned to go back to bed, Daniel sat there for a long time, staring at the bills but no longer seeing them. He had thought he was the one saving those girls, but maybe, in some way, they were saving him too, reminding him of what it meant to open his heart, to give without expecting anything in return.